Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Outer Realm with myself, Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. We are broadcasting live here on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM and 105.3 FM in New Orleans. You can also find us on Twitch, on UFO Paranormal YouTube channel, and a whole bunch of Facebook channels for the United Public Radio. So go and seek us out. Tonight, actually, we're going to be welcoming Darcy Weir and Gary King to the show, and we will be discussing UFOs and crop circles and a whole lot more. My gosh, it's going to be really exciting. But in order to participate in the show, you all need to get into the chat room. So find one of wherever it is we're streaming and get on chat. We will see you here in the comment section. However, we will only be able to reply to you if you are in the YouTube chat room for the United Public Radio. So go on in there and, get settled, and we will do our very best to get your questions and comments out also. So, okay, one second. Yes, we're good.
We're there. So I'll just
good. Okay.
give out, hi, Dolly. Just saw you there right now. I'm going to give out some information before they come on.
Okay.
We have two guests tonight, so we have two bios, and they're quite impressive bios. So it wasn't easy to condense them, but don't worry, because I'm sure a lot of information is going to be given out during the show. Starting with Darcy Weir or Wire. I don't want to pronounce that.
Weir, I believe.
Weir.
Hi, Zach, man. Yes.
Very cool. Love his name. Is a young filmmaker who recently completed a new documentary based on the theory that relic hominids, like Sasquatch, live in the deep wilderness around the world. Also created a series of documentaries on UFOs, secret space, Bigfoot, underground bases like Area 51, and Phil Schneider's Dulce, New Mexico testimonials. Our other guest tonight joining us is a former lawyer with a former private detective agency in London. Gary King first encountered crop circles in 1997. Later on July 7th, 2007, he became one of three witnesses on what has become known as, I've never spoken to a witness who's witnessed something like this, as the 777 event. Gary has lectured nationally and internationally, has recently written a 16-episode series of documentaries for Gaia TV, together with a forthcoming 2-hour special on crop circles, which will air on the History Channel this month, March.
Ooh, wow.
Very interesting. I know, they're both so interesting, and there's so much to their bios. But like I said, we really want to give that information during the show. And if you want to read up more and find their contacts after the show, you can go to our Facebook page, and everything is there. Hi, Zach.
Yes,
nice to see you. Yeah.
So we're just waiting for our guests to make their way over to the studio. But in the meantime, it's so. I've always been fascinated with crop circles because there's just so much controversy that surrounds them. And in doing so, I actually came across, very last minute, because just trying to get a better understanding of our guests. And I actually came across crop circles in Canada. Dun, 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 dun. I know. So yes.
Even I'm just like, what? Really?
For me,
I was shocked that they're not only in the States.
Well, no, I mean, they're usually the UK seems to get them, but I also found out that some of the earliest references to crop circles comes from a 1678 pamphlet, of all things, where the circles were described as spiraling circles in a field done by the devil.
Wow.
It would be.
Then I would imagine it would. I mean, Fibonacci was looked at as a demon for his patterns in math, but yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, the ancients were more connected, I think, to ET than we are present time. They were a lot much more relaxed about it. But with respect to Canada, one of the earliest reported crop circles was in 1925 in Lee Shore, Alberta. And
that makes sense, Alberta.
Yeah. And well, they're kind of all out. Alberta in BC seems to be a hotbed. So is like Northern Ontario.
Yeah,
where it's open. And Well, up near the mountains and stuff too. It's just really strange how it goes. But Duhamel, Alberta, there was in 1967 there was a crop circle.
Crazy.
Now, it's a small hamlet near Camrose, Alberta, and the circles appeared in a farmer's field. The National Defense actually went in there to investigate these things. Several weeks before the circles appear, a local farmer had been plagued, he said, with strange occurrences and UFOs. The circles are found by accident because he had to go in and retrieve his cattle because they would not come in on their own, which apparently this never happened. They always would come in on their own.
Yeah.
So the cow. So he went and got those. And the investigator even admitted that the marks that were left kind of perplexed him. He didn't really know what to make of them. They ranged 30 to 36 feet. And he also stated the marks, in his opinion, were done by, and I don't know how he figured this out, 135-ton aircraft or spacecraft. How do you determine like the weight,
Well, somebody must have given him that information. He probably said, "Oh, it was about 50 feet," or it was about,
It was different, but today it's actually considered unsolved by the Department of National Defense here in Canada. It's completely unsolved. They just have no real idea, or they choose not to say. But the most recent documented, was Armstrong, British Columbia, July 31st, 2006.
Yeah, that's pretty close to now.
Close. Yeah, I mean, I didn't find anything earlier, but a rural farming community 140 miles north of Washington Canadian border. Wow. That's a lot of shit going on in there, but it's believed that the bizarre shape of the formation resembled the shape of a UFO, which had been witnessed by several people the hours just before dawn, the day the crop circle was found. Blackened seed heads, similar to the ones found in a 2010 Dutch circle, to where the Dutch circle, they basically had everything analyzed in a laboratory, and it was said that they were carbonized. And it measured approximately 100 feet long. And I'm thinking, jeepers.
Wow.
I did not know about any of this. And I'd like to think I'm pretty versed on stuff. And I'm just
you know what? It's so controversial. It really is. It's highly controversial. And we were made privy to a documentary, and I got to view it. And I loved it. I learned a lot. I'm always learning, but I really learned a lot, and not just about crop circles. There were incidences in there that we'll discuss later, but I was shocked to hear about Italy. Mm-hmm. And then at one point there was subtitles. I don't know if it was just the one that I was viewing, that they were in Spanish. I'm like, thank God, because I was listening as I was doing something at certain parts, and I thank God I can understand Spanish, because I knew exactly. But what he said when he said the proprietor of this land, see, I just went boom, like right to the screen. It's like, why did I leave the screen? And I'm just watching it on my phone, so intrigued by all of it. It was really very well done. Very well done. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
and for someone who doesn't pay attention to things like that, like, it really shook me. I was just like, I always thought this was just a facade, maybe a couple of them, maybe, for real, but they have had discussions and proven, but you learn what is fake and what is real.
I know. I don't know. This is something that seems to be really, there's too many people, I think, that they just think it's a farce. And unfortunately, you get the ones who have tried to do the fake ones, who really make it bad for everybody else, and I know that watching the clip that they sent, which I believe is coming out in March, so I'm hoping they'll expand on that a little bit, but it's basically, shows these tiny little lights going over the crop field, and you see this thing taking form, just like invisible hands.
There's a lot of evidence
and they can't debunk
in this documentary. Yes.
Yeah, they can't debunk it. So I'm without giving away too much, I know we've got Gary is in the UK, and I'm really hoping that we're not waking him up. But I know I'm just waiting to actually hear back. So So then we get into UFOs. The one thing I did find interesting was these little orbs that
Oh,
how they showed one coming in through Niagara Falls.
yeah, that wasn't interesting. That was frightening for me.
That
I was
is.
so
Oh,
frightened.
they're actually here. Okay. Woohoo.
Okay, they're in
So yeah.
queue.
So let's
They're backstage, as Rick would say. They're
backstage. Let's
backstage.
bring them in. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Whoa, hello.
Hello. Hi. How are
Hello.
you?
Hello.
Very well, thank you.
Hello.
God, you must
Thank
be
you for
tired.
joining us.
I know it's
Yeah.
probably like close to 2:30 in the morning over there for you. So,
No, I live in Mexico City now, so I'm
oh,
actually.
do you?
Hi,
Oh,
Darcy.
okay, good. Because
Hey.
Michelle's like, he's in the UK. He's gonna be late. I'm like, okay. So perfect. Hi, Darcy. How are you?
Lots of coffee,
Hey,
Gary.
Michelle and Amelia. Good to see
Hi,
you.
Darcy. How do you pronounce your last name properly? I didn't want to butcher it.
Weir.
Weir. That's really
Yeah,
easy.
just
Okay.
pop a D on the end of that, and you got weird.
That's easy to remember for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. It's what I
use.
used to think about crop circles, but not now. Not after
Yeah.
watching that.
I think you're going to learn some really interesting information from Gary and I tonight.
Oh my
Really
gosh.
excited
Yeah.
about it. It was I mean, we watched the clips, of course, and I was just like, wow, this is very cool. And I was just saying before you came on that it prompted me to look up, stuff in North America and found some in Canada. And I was sort of like, why would they want to come to Canada? It's a lot of snow. But anyway, I'm Canadian, like I said. but it was interesting. It was interesting to find that much like the documentary, that they sort of pop up all over the world and seem to end up primarily in one location. So where do you guys want to start? Like, why don't we just start with, like, first of all, how did you two connect up and decide to team up on this?
All right. I think I'll lead that one, and Gary, you can
go for it.
So I was actually working with a research journalist, Jaime Maussan, who is very popular in Mexico and Latin America. He's been on Televisa and TV Azteca for a long time. He started as a journalist for 60 Minutes in Mexico, 60 Minutos. But, he's been covering the UFO related phenomenon for like the same amount of time that he's been a journalist. He's been interested in this phenomenon, and crop circles are just another layer of this phenomenon. I mean, if you think about it, there's people that allege that they've been abducted. There's people that have had contact or experienced events of massive UFOs and so on and so forth. But then you've also got like the aspect of government suppression of this knowledge, and you've got crop circles. And crop circles are, I believe, a medium in which possibly some intelligence is using to convey a message to us, because possibly that's the only way that they can do it. Maybe they're so far away and their technology just sends that message. It's, instead of a drone, you've got a glyph. And there's that whole aspect. And then Gary and I intersected because he works with Jaime Maussan. And I kind of created this documentary with the help of Sebastian, his son, and Jaime's news organization, and the research he had been doing throughout the years. He'd been flying to the UK, and his first major crop circle tour happened with our man Gary King here, and they've been in touch ever since. And now Gary works with and is creating news publications in terms of this whole phenomenon for Jaime's news organization, called Tercer Millennium. And now I'm speaking out with Gary King on as many podcasts and news related, radio casts and so on and so forth about this documentary that features Gary King, features Jaime Maussan and the crop circle phenomenon. And I think this is the starting of a great relationship. Gary's very informed, and I have a feeling we'll probably do some more work together in the future.
I like it. Gary, tell us all about it. Why Wiltshire? Why does that seem to be the crazy place? I mean, why not Wiltshire? It's crazy anyway.
Well, I'm very interested in that, because after you've kind of established that for yourself, at least, that it's not guys with boards who are doing it for a laugh on the way home from the pub, then I inexorably move towards, okay, there's a message here, or there's a series of messages, or there's a communication that's ongoing. And I think that the meaning, what they mean, is more important than who's making them. And so I focused my attention toward that. Mm-hmm. And so I went back to university in 2005 in Cardiff to study language and communication, because I wanted to understand more about semiotics and how we derive meaning from symbols and signs and so on. And one of the big things that struck me during that course was context. Context is everything for any communication. And the crop circles keep hitting Wiltshire, this particular area. So I looked into this area as much as I could to find out its history and why possibly this is the hotspot. And it surprised me to find out that this was the first area where farming began in the British Isles. This is, but the British Isles was at one time completely covered in trees, and if you were a squirrel, you could get from one end to the other without touching the ground. But they cleared an area of trees and transformed from hunter-gatherers to farmers. And this is where it began. And then, if you want to take that further, farming created wealth. Farming created, once we were able to develop a surplus of grain, we were able to become more wealthy, and landowners and so on developed. And that led to the British Empire. And there's an obelisk in Wiltshire where crop circles regularly appear that's in honor of a man called Sir William Petty, who famously said in 1649, I think it was, okay, the British Empire has made tremendous wealth from its endeavors, and now we no longer need a surplus of grain. What we need is a surplus of souls. We need disposable people, and slavery, and Africans, the Caribbean, and so on, to grow crops became, the business of the day for the British Empire. So the history of what led us to where we are now is right there. And then if you go back further, you've got Stonehenge, you've got Avebury, you've got Silbury Hill, you've got these stone circles that are mysterious and enigmatic. Mm-hmm. And the connection between the crop circles we found is that the hidden or implicit geometry that's contained within these stone circles is also hidden implicitly within the crop circles.
Oh,
so
fascinating.
The mysteries of the old and the mysteries of the new, and then there's also a recollection for us about our history, where we come from.
Wow, I wouldn't have thought that you'd be going that deep into it. I've read things such as a lot of scholars believing that there's a connection between, let's say, rare ancient Sumerian symbols or ancient symbols of the Mayan calendar, etc., and that the signs and symbols found among the crop circles seem to have, I guess, some kind of a connection. Do you feel the same way? Do you find
there are 5 categories of crop circles. So number one is geometry. Yes. And geometry, most people think of geometry as what they had to learn in school begrudgingly, trigonometry and, 3, 4, 5 triangle. Everybody scratched their head, but why do we need to know this?
It's true. Yeah. That was one of them.
When you look back to Pythagoras and Plato and Socrates and what the ancient Greeks were getting up to with geometry, you find out that it's linked to philosophy. Mm-hmm. It's connected deeply to the pursuit of truth. Just to give you one example of that, if you draw a circle and you put a triangle inside that circle, and then you put a circle inside that triangle, the ratio between those 2 circles, the outer and the inner one, is exactly 2 to 1. Okay? Now, Plato called that an ever-truth. It's always been true, it's true now, and it will always be true. So they used geometry as an anchor in the pursuit of truth behind the reason for humanity and what is our place here on earth.
Right.
Geometry was the main topic that they used to try and establish truth.
Right.
So we're being told about truth. That's number one, geometry. Number two is philosophical or religious symbols. So we see the cross of Christ, as you mentioned, Mayan symbols. We see the yin yang from the ancient Chinese I Ching. We see the tree of life from the Kabbalah. We see the wings of Horus from the ancient Egyptian symbolism. So I believe what they're telling us there is a bit like a reminder. Do you remember that humanity has created these symbols along the way to try and understand divinity, to try and understand the miracle of creation? And you've come up with these symbols along the way, some of them good, some of them not so good, some of them very clever. So that's category number two. Three is animals and insects, birds, dragonflies, ants, spiders, butterflies. Like
those are the familiar ones, the spiders.
Yeah. So, we can draw all sorts of connotations from that, whether or not we're being reminded to the destruction of what we're doing to the ecology with regards to pesticides and so on in farming. Agriculture is causing a great deal of problems for us with regards to climate change, far worse than cars. Electric cars to save us. We need to address farming. Number four is astronomical symbols. So we've been reminded of where the planets are in relation to us in the solar system on a specific day. So we've had a crop circle appear on, say, the 26th of June, and it shows us exactly where Mars and Venus and Pluto and Jupiter and so on are around us on that day. And the fifth category is abstract, completely abstract. We have no idea what they mean. They're just sort of symmetrical or asymmetrical. They contain crescents and circles and squares, and they just seem...
Future?
Well, the dictionary definition of abstract contains the phrase connection to other realities.
Dimensions.
Maybe we're being jerked along the way to realize that we're dealing with something that is from somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that would be the one that would fascinate me the most. It's just, where are we going with that? Damn, I got to school and learn my geometry.
I'm a descendant of Fibonacci, and I couldn't get it the first time. But
easy, Amelia. 0 plus 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2, and
that's about as far as I get. I think, it's like once high school, I'm done. I have always hated math, but anyways.
So there's one additional message I'll add to the 5 different types. There's just the fact that somebody's sending a direct message in response to who we are. And if you look at some incredible crop circles that Gary and I have discussed in previous shows, you can look at the Arecibo message, which appeared in a crop in 2001. That was a supposedly direct response to Carl Sagan's Arecibo space probe that was sent out in 1974. And the point of that probe was to communicate with extraterrestrial races in the stars and say, here's who we are. We're Earthlings. We live on this planet surrounding our sun, the third planet. And we have this type of DNA, and this is our human form. This is the technology we use to collect data from the stars. It's radio telescopes. And we got a message on 2001, the Chibolton crop circle appeared, a crop glyph. And that was a 10-point response, exactly mirroring our signal that went out with the space probe. Yeah, you can look it up.
Listening.
You can Google it, and it shows their form, their bodily form, their DNA structure. It shows their technology they use to beam information around the cosmos, which is apparently a microwave telescope. And that's direct evidence that we've got some kind of peaceful contact going on there, and that there's a response to something we sent into space, and we're getting it back.
You know, it's sort of, you have so many people out there running around saying disclosure, disclosure. It almost sounds to me like what you're saying is we've had disclosure. What do we expect? You know, they're just going to drop down a mothership over top of every city like what we see in the films. Is this pretty much been disclosure the whole way through?
We've had civilian disclosure. We've had, activist and independent, private disclosure through people like us that are interested in this subject and are speaking that truth. But we haven't had the mainstream academic, scientific, and government disclosure that everybody's been looking for. It's just started really in 2017 with the To the Stars Academy release, the Pentagon videos. That's sort of slowly unfolding things. But yeah, for a lot of people,
I believe Canada started that little domino effect, though.
Canada has released documents too, for sure.
They were the first.
France has released documents. Brazil has released their documents. Mexico, to some extent, they released videos, much like the gimbal video. Actually, Jaime Maussan received the Sedena videos back in the 90s from the Air Force in Mexico, because they wanted that to go public. Wow. And it's filmed with FLIR camera technology. They thought they were chasing narcos planes over the Campeche region of Mexico, but actually they were chasing UFOs, and the UFOs turned around and started pacing their craft.
Wow.
So there's every country has had their own version. I think everybody's waiting for the United States to be the big kahuna that's going to come out.
Weren't they? Were they not last to disclose?
They probably have the best. Files. They have the best information, I'd say.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I'm going to ask a lot of silly questions because this is all new to me. Excuse me now for that. Why are there so many occurrences in England? It's such a place where you're going to find an abundance of crop circles. And what are the messages like coming there? Are they different than the rest of the world?
Yes. With the more complex ones, there have been very complex ones that have appeared in various places around the world. But by far, Wiltshire, this little 1,300 square miles of a county in southern England has received most of them. And, we can speculate as to why. Personally, as I mentioned earlier, I believe that it's to do with our history. The Bank of England, a lot of people don't know the history of England, and the City of London, for example, is a separate island that lives within England. The Queen isn't allowed to enter the City of London without permission. It has its own police force, just like Rome.
Wow.
As a Canadian, I like that.
Right.
It's nice to know she has to ask permission for something.
I'm a Canadian too, just so you know.
Well, yeah, and her face is all over our money, and nobody asked me.
I dated a Canadian 7 years ago, and her mum used to ask me, do you like the Queen? Do you go out and wave the flag? And I'm like, hell no.
I have a good amount of respect for monarchy.
I believe the Australians call the Brits Poms, prisoners of Mother England.
Oh. Everybody, you can't ditch the Queen. They get real hostile. I got a lot of British family and friends. Never ditch the Queen. That's something I've always been told.
More polarized now with people who are
right.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 years. She's the 174th granddaughter of William the Conqueror.
That's true. That's family for me, William the Conqueror.
Right.
Yeah. So
I believe that Britain went with the British Empire, what we did, and we became arguably the biggest empire in the world, which kind of started to wind down in the 1950s, and we pulled back. But by then, we'd established all of the financial routes into all these other countries. And if you want to trade your money, if you want to put money offshore in a tax haven, it's a British territory. They have 2 cents in the Bank of England. So we wield a huge influence around the world. My teacher used to call the City of London the heart of darkness because of the activities it's got up to over the last 1,000 years. And so I've come to the conclusion for myself that it's to do with our history. And the reason that they've addressed this country and put it in this country is because we can see that they've covered it up. We can see that they'll go to any lengths not to not to say that the crop circles are real, you know. That's a whole other story. But at the same time, we're reminded of what role Britain has played in the world, particularly over the last 400 years.
It's interesting because yes, they do seem to want to, you know, cover it up, and it seemed to be getting to a point where it's like, okay, they're there. We know they're there. We don't have an explanation for all of them. But then when you try to make the UFO connection, no, we don't believe in UFOs. So, you know, pretty much, you know, judging by like looking at the film, like the orbs are fascinating.
Oh my God, the Niagara Falls. I was frightening because I'm 45 minutes away from there. So
I'm looking at them right from here. And where you see that light coming from, there's tunnels behind there. There's tunnels behind the falls right there. So I thought, oh, if it went into a tunnel, I thought that was very fascinating. So can you tell us about the orbs? Are these like interdimensional? Are they beings? Are they crafts? Like what energy? What would be your explanation for that?
Well, I'll give a crack at that. I think orbs have been highly reported for a long time, not only by pilots, but, you know, for example, back in World War II, these orbs that were flying around the Air Force squadrons on both the Axis and Allied signs were nicknamed Foo Fighters because they were this strange craft that seemed to zip around the sky and evade them, and, you know, really perplexed pilots. My grandfather was a Air Force pilot in the Canadian Royal Air Force. Anyways, orbs have been reported all around the world in many different UFO sightings, and Jaime Maussan's accounts of orbs showing up in Russian areas all around the country. There's been stories of orb-type UFOs showing over strategic missile bases in the United States that harbor nuclear warheads and literally shutting them down. If you want to read the book UFOs and Nukes, that's a really important historical account of real events that happened with UFOs in American military history involving nuclear weapons. But, you know, when it comes to the crop circle formation phenomenon, a very famous crop circle that formed in, I believe it was 1996, was Oliver Castle. And this was recorded by an Australian gentleman who decided, here's one thing about the crop circle formations. They attract thousands of people every single year. You know, you and I may not have been clued into them as much until tonight, but there are people that have been following crop circles, and they will go every summer, every spring to the UK to see if new formations show up. And they do every single year show up. And, you know, even last year, one showed up of the COVID-19 virus in a field, and
that's a little weird.
and Gary's even been doing a news report on that. So, you know,
my gosh,
every year there's something showing up that reflects what's going on around the world. And the Oliver Castle incident was this gentleman from Australia. He was camping out. He was doing what most crop circle enthusiasts do. They go to these farm areas where crop circles are notorious for showing up, and they try to see if a crop circle appears. And this gentleman saw some lights hovering over the crop down. I think it's that is he was on top of a hill, and when he saw these lights, he turned on his little mini DV camcorder, you know, the little tapes they used to take in the 90s, and he started recording the lights. And it's not till later that he realized that in the video, these orbs are encircling the formation that they're laying down right before his eyes, because it was far away, yada yada. So Gary has met people that were involved firsthand with meeting the gentleman who recorded that video, and he's fairly convinced, based on all the evidence, that it's not a hoax. It's not some computer-generated graphics. It's just a real video that was recorded on a camcorder.
It's difficult to do on a tape. It's like, you know, taking a photograph of something. You can't fudge the tape, but I guess you can once it hits the computer.
Yeah, and we all have seen the viral video that's on YouTube, but in the documentary, we show more footage that came from the same tape before and after.
Wow.
So go, Gary, please tell us more.
Yeah, the Oliver's Castle. It was the year before I got involved. I started my research in 1997, so this happened in 96. So I only got to talk to people subsequently and also look at the analysis of the footage that was sent to a laboratory in London to analyze frame by frame. And we have to think back, like Darcy said, this is 1996 technology, tapes. And the striking thing about it is that he's hand holding the camcorder. So the horizon line is doing this all the time as he's filming it. So, but when you watch the orbs, they're perfectly at the same height all the way around the field as they fly over and the formation goes down. So the analysis that was carried out in London showed that there were no digital artifacts, as you would have seen behind the balls as they move from frame to frame. And also because of the you know, the up and down footage, it showed that this would have been very difficult to do. In fact, in 2004, a filmmaker from Norway came over to make a documentary about crop circles, and he contacted some Disney animators at that time and said, okay, look, how easy would it be to make this, given that this happened in 1996? And they said, well, we'd want, looking at that sort of technology, we want at least 2 weeks. And to be honest, we don't think we'd get it as good as that. That's 2004. And then now it would be much easier because you've got motion graphics on computers and these things would be much easier to do. But then the second part of that is that my dear friend, Michael Glickman, who I worked closely with for many years, he was a retired professor of architecture from the University of Southern California. He researched crop circles from the early 90s. And he was my mentor in teaching me the hidden or implicit geometry that you find within the crop circles. And if you look at the design of the formation that came down that day, it's got 6 arms that come off it. So it's ostensibly a 6-fold crop circle, right? It's dividing a circle into 6. But within it is 7-fold geometry. Now, 7-fold geometry, for those who want to run away as soon as you mention this, if you divide a circuit...
I'm kidding. You make it too easy.
Okay, imagine you have some friends over for pizza, okay, and you've got a round pizza and you've got 7. If you slice a pizza by 7, no one's going to get an equal slice, okay, because if you divide a circle by 7, it's 51.51 degrees. Any other number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you'll get a whole number, so everyone will get fair. But 7, so 7-fold geometry is particularly difficult to hide within 6-fold geometry. And this formation contained hidden 7-fold geometry, which says that the intellectual profile of whoever designed it and created it is off the chart.
Wow. It's hard to be skeptical about this. It's very difficult. I would imagine for, you know, even the diehard scientists who really want to be skeptics, all this evidence, you're making it very difficult. You can tell the difference. Can you explain to the audience the difference between a man-made crop circle, and
Yes,
the evidence that it disproves. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, damage. Humans make damage, and they take time. We've Jaime Maussan even put forward £100,000 kind of reward for anybody that wanted to step forward and make a crop circle under the same conditions that we regularly see them appear under. And they don't appear, crop circles don't just appear like one day and then another one a week later. We get 5 in one night, and then we get 3 the next night. We get 7. Yeah. So we've put forward and challenged these people who claim they make them, and they claim they make these claims very loudly. And we've seen you do these demonstrations for TV. You always do it in the daylight. You always damage the crop.
You can't do that at night.
Right. They're always small and shitty designs, frankly. So we want you to create something like we regularly see. They don't step forward to do that.
And
sorry.
No, you please.
I was just going to say, if I walk into a crop circle in the morning and I look at the ground and I can see damage every 18 inches, I know someone's done that with a board. If I see the crop coming back up to the sun and it's lifted off the ground and there's no damage in it, and if I've walked into the crop circle because it's been raining the night before so heavily, and by the time I get to the crop circle, my feet are like 2 pounds heavier with clay because it's very clay all around, and then as soon as I step in, I'm putting mud on the stems and it's pristine clean. Then I've got to start asking myself, oh, these guys that make them then so they can float, they can solve mathematical problems that haven't been solved in history before, and so on and so on, and it just gets stupid, really.
It does, and you see the amount of respect that these beings have for our planet by how delicate they are with the plants, which is quite impressive, and it's a lesson in itself, really, to the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, when you see the plants continue to grow after this glyph has been laid out, I mean, the human-made ones are not going to be continuing to grow if you're breaking the stalk. So that's impressive in its own, and the seeds still can, harvest a crop afterwards as well.
Amazing.
Do you find you get a lot of resistance from the scientific community because you're not, technically in the boys' club of their science? It's like archaeologists and like the New Age, ancient alien sort of researchers. Like they don't want to hear about it. Treasure hunters, we don't want to hear your opinion. You're not an archaeologist. Is it the same for you guys? You have the evidence, you're researching it, but you're not technically a man of science the way they deem you to be, or themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. It's the stigma. And the other thing you run up against, which Amelia touched on a few minutes ago, was, you say, oh, okay, well, if you put the facts down, then it must be difficult for people to accept. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in.
Right.
There is this phenomenon known as willful blindness.
Right.
And there's a wonderful book written by a woman called, an English author called Margaret Heffernan. She wrote a book called Willful Blindness, and she gives stories in that book about the most amazing things where people present data. Like there's a story in America where people were dying asbestosis from the factory they were working at. And this lady did research and she found out that everybody was dying because they were getting asbestosis. And when she started to people, no one wanted to hear her because it would have affected jobs and it would have affected the community and so on and so on. So they wanted her to be quiet, even though it was
yeah. So, of course, it's the world we live in. Nobody wants to rewrite history, and nobody wants to admit that they're academically wrong, but they're just not open to fresh ideas unless they do it behind the scenes and like, okay, let's just say I did it. So, well, that makes it difficult. So 777, the 777 event.
July 7th.
777. I know. They're lucky numbers. Yes.
Yeah.
So, what's with that? At
that point, I'd been researching crop circles for 10 years, and I was very, very fortunate in that the man who took me to the crop circles, he was a kind of Tai Chi teacher, energy teacher.
Right.
He said to me, look, if you want to get into this, spend 10 years. Don't join the groups, the research groups, because they're all fighting with each other, and there's all sorts of collusion going on with all these people. He said, stay on your own, study the geometry, go and visit as many crop circles as you can, and ground yourself in it, And so I did. Twice, and I spent 10 years, and I had some incredible coincidental experiences, transformative experiences, just by visiting crop circles. And so 10 years later, I was on a summer break from university, and I thought I'd take my trailer down to Wiltshire, and I'll spend 6 weeks and, go and visit crop circles and hang out at the crop circle cafe and have groovy conversations with all sorts of wild, weird, and wonderful people, and, do that. So that's what I did. And then, and because the date was approaching of 7/7/7, the 7th of July, 2007, I thought, I'm going to do a night watch. And I'd never really done any night watches before. I prefer my bed, to be honest, than to sit on a field in freezing cold. But my girlfriend called me up, and she said, she asked me, it was about 9 o'clock in the evening. She said, she was in Cardiff, about 70 miles away. And she said, has there been a crop circle today? And I said, no, not that I know of. I said, but there's been a few rumours, but we haven't found anything. And she said, well, I've just walked into the village, and she calls it a village, but it's in the city of Cardiff, okay? And she said, I've seen wheat growing out of the gaps in the pavement. She said, and I've lived here 30 years. She'd never seen this before, right? She saw it as a sign.
Oh, wow.
She said, what are you doing tonight? I said, I'm going to go up on that hill, and I'm going to do a night watch. She said, I'm coming. And she jumped in the car, and she arrived at my trailer about 11 o'clock at night. And we chatted, and the funny thing was, I had a carrier bag on my that I was using as a trash bag, and it had the Welsh dragon on the side of this carrier bag, this plastic bag. And we had this conversation about dragons. Why do people use dragons as symbolism? The Chinese, and the Welsh, and blah blah blah. We had this conversation. Anyway, once that was over, we jumped in the car and we drove off to Eastfield. And Eastfield is the most popular because in 1990 that's where this big agroglyph appeared, and everybody come from all over the world and looked at these things, because up until that point they've been circles, and when straight lines appeared and sort of little squares off of it, you realized it wasn't the wind, because nobody thought it was man-made before that. They all thought it was a weather phenomenon. So we thought that field, and there's a hill that sits above it, and so we went up there. And when we got there was this guy I coincidentally met that day who was a UFO kind of enthusiast, and he had a bunch of cameras set up, and I recognized him, and in the darkness, because he had this big leather, motorcycle jacket on. He looked like a transformer. I saw him sort of in the dark, and we went and sat down and wrapped ourselves in blankets and just started chatting. And he told us that he'd been filming the field from about 11 o'clock, just before it goes dark in Britain, in the summertime. And he showed us his equipment. He had this image enhancer, and he waved it over the field and showed us that there was nothing in the field. And we sat there chatting, and we had a really groovy conversation. He was a scientist. This guy invented chip and pin for credit cards. When you put your number in for cards.
That's cool.
And he worked for Rolls Royce and built air conditioning.
Who doesn't love a Rolls?
Right. So complete scientist, and so we had this groovy conversation, and about 20 past 3 in the morning, there was a flash of light. And I remember just seeing the grass, light for a second, and we were like, what was that? And we carried on our conversation. We speculated for a few minutes about what that might be, and then about 20 minutes after that, he decided to get up and look through the camera and see if there was anything, to see. And we were wrapped in blankets and sleeping bags and freezing cold. He opened the lens viewfinder of the camera, and he said, you've got to get up, guys. You've got to look at this. And we were like, what is it? We didn't want to get up because it was so cold.
Bring it here.
2 feet in front of you, I'm not getting up.
Yeah. Come on. It's really special for this.
Yeah.
Trust me, it is. Get up. And so we jumped up and we walked over, and then as soon as we looked through the viewfinder, we could see just this row of circles. And it was like it was a double take, because you could see it through the lens, the viewfinder of the camera, but as we looked like that, you couldn't see it in the dark. It was still dark, and the field was just black. We were shuffling backwards and forwards, and like he was moving the camera along it, and it was huge. We could see that it was huge. And so we waited another 15 or 20 minutes, and then the light started to creep in. And we said to this guy, Wynn, you know, carry on filming. We're going to go down in the car and get to the other end of the field and walk into it. And he filmed us all the way walking into it. And we were ants, you know, in this vast 150 circle formation.
Wow.
That no one could have made in front of us in the dark, silently, with no lights, whilst the whole field was being filmed, and made, you know, one circle every 2 minutes. You know,
I was going to say they put them out there pretty quick, don't they? Like a matter of minutes. So it's not like it would take a person all night to do something like that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, to give an example, and I regularly talk about this in lectures, because I like to deal with the man-made thing in the first 10 minutes of any lecture. And once I put that to bed, I get onto the juicy stuff.
Right.
Asahi Beer, the Japanese beer company, you know, they had a crop circle made for their campaign. It was $1 million campaign. A couple of years ago. They rented a field from a farmer, nice and flat, so it's nice and easy. They used GPS technology. They used 40 engineers, surveyors, and, you know, all sorts of people that were expert at these kinds of things, who took 7 days from sunrise to sunset to make this beer label.
Wow.
They used tractors to cut the wheat out, and they used weed whackers and all this kind of stuff.
Amateurs.
So, when you compare that,
Oh my gosh, that is too funny. I think Gary's gonna bring back groovy. Just saying.
I like it.
I like it too. I think you're bringing back groovy. Everything's groovy tomorrow.
Groovy, baby. And
Yeah.
additionally to, you know, what Gary just said, that glyph that was man-made was laid out on flat ground. And
Wow.
there's very often these crop circles are showing up, these glyphs are showing up on terrain that is, you know, on an inclination, hills, and it's not just wheat, you know, it's barley, canola, wheat, corn, you name it. And
flaxseed. We've even got trees in Holland. Trees were bent over. I've got photographs that are bent into a circle.
I've never heard of that. Trees.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
me neither. So you know, different medians that the artists are working with, and you know, somebody in the chat here says, so an advanced alien, you know, species, super intelligence, can't speak English, and I think what you're kind of missing there is that in these glyphs, they're speaking in a universal language. They're speaking in math. They're speaking in physics. They're speaking in, you know, basically geometry that Gary was speaking about earlier. And this is universal. Every culture has, when they get to a certain intelligence, can read between those lines.
This is esoteric, like sacred geometry, basically.
Yeah. And
with the language of the ancients also.
And English is, I'm sure that they can probably send an English message if they want, but there's something way more complex that they're getting across with these incredible glyphs.
The alphabet, this is what I loved about my university degree. The alphabet is, they're symbols that we created to represent sounds that come out of our mouth. When we invented writing, which wasn't too long ago in our history, we changed, because up until that point, all of accumulated knowledge was preserved in stories and passed down through stories, like the Aborigines with their stories and so on, or the Native Americans. When we started to look at the written word, we don't realize it, but we use our eyes to hear our own voice in our head. Well, eyes are for seeing, they're not for hearing. You know, we're supposed to hear things when we get stories told to us. So, you know, the alphabet and whether or not they speak English is you know, relatively short in history. But number is a very mysterious thing, and geometry is number. Geometry is number in space. A triangle is 3 in space. A square is 4 in space. This is the universal language of consciousness, as eminent scholars like Jung and Marie-Louise von Franz says, that our psyche is composed of number. And the itself, 5-fold flowers. Why do we have the Fibonacci sequence? We have 5 teeth when we're born. They fall out and are replaced by 8 teeth. 5, 8, and 13 are the Fibonacci sequence. It's living.
Let's not go there. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I just recently found that out a couple years ago while I was researching. My family actually built Pisa originally, all the way back in the 1100s, and I just happened to find out that Fibonacci was related somehow, and I went, of course, I can't paint, draw, and I can't. Like, the math is terrible, and I work with law enforcement agencies, and I have to use software to do suspects' photos because I can't draw to save my life. But I'm so curious about the coronavirus. When this happened with the what was everybody thinking? Like, who saw that first? That's what I want to know. Who got the first?
No one knows who sees these things first. They get reported usually by microlight pilots in the area, and I know most of them. They will fly in the morning to do a test flight of their microlights before they start doing lessons or whatever for the day, and they will find them, and then they'll let us know. But when this one was discovered, there's a psychologist in Los Angeles called Jerry Croth, who had done some research into crop circles for a number of years, and when he saw this one, he thought, "Wow, I've got to look at this." There are it's like a blob in the middle with 6 circles, 3 large ones and 3 small ones, and then there are these what look like spike proteins coming off of it. But one of them is much bigger, and it has 8 tufts of wheat in the top of the sort of circle that's at the end of it. So he thought, okay, there's 9 of them. It seems like our attention's being drawn to the 8th spike protein. What does this mean? What is spike protein 8? So he contacted some epidemiologists and some virologists and people that he knew, and they told him that spike protein 8 of the virus is actually connected to boosting our immune system to fight the virus. The virus contains within it something which assists our immune system to fight the virus. Okay? Right. And so when I picked up on that, I contacted Jerry Croth and interviewed him for a television piece I did, and contacted some other epidemiologists and said, look, I need to know about is this connected to the vaccine? Have they used this to boost our immune system? Unfortunately, it's proprietary knowledge, right? They're not giving too much information.
No.
But it seems that this crop circle, which displays all the signs of not being man-made because it's not damaged, it's beautifully weaved and so on, seems to be telling us that there's a key to us fighting this virus connected to spike protein 8. Investigations are still ongoing. And
that was the last time any crop circle, anything was given to us regarding COVID. Was that?
Yes, the only one. Yes, the only one. It was in June.
Oh, I hope they give us another one. Yeah.
It was in May last year. It appeared. I think it was the 20th.
Oh my gosh.
And that's a reoccurring theme in crop circle messages, is that there's a obvious concern for mankind. These messages often convey the message, first of all, like, hey guys, we're here. Second of all, hey, we're watching you. This is where you're going. We're concerned. And you can see that. You can see even in like the famous crop circle that showed up with the disc and the alien head, that has a binary code message in it. And they deciphered that. It says there's much pain, but there's still time. Meaning, obvious, they can see where we're going in terms of our history, but we have time to change things, to make things better for ourselves.
Do you believe that it's for the environment or for the people, the civilization? I know they're one and the same in the end, but
yeah, I mean, civilization has wiped itself out so many times. So,
yeah.
I think it's for Earth, like Earthlings, everything that's here. So, that would be probably Jaime Maussan's interpretation too. He's a environmental activist and UFO researcher and all this stuff too. So, we gotta sort of take stock in some of these glyphs that are showing up that people say, oh, there's nothing to see here. It's just a man-made formation, but really they're messages that are coming every single year, and people are traveling to see them. People are deciphering them, and they seem to unveil incredible information that's important to us.
See, that's just it.
If we
They
pay
are
attention.
being unveiled. That's right. So how do you get people to listen? Like, the powers that be wake up. Like,
Maybe
it's right in front of your face.
Maybe if we get like the Kardashians or somebody
Well, they just finished their last
go on a
season.
little trip over to Wiltshire,
Right.
Gary and I will walk them around and make sure they feel special.
In the tours that I've done, I've taken some it's surprising the famous people that would get in touch for me to take them on a tour around the crop circles. I've taken gurus from India. I've taken the head of bank from Mexico, the head of Santander Bank from Colombia. They've come over on their own private jets and had me march.
Gurus make so much sense because that just literally translates, lead the way kind of thing. So that makes total sense. That had to be really groovy. That'd be really cool. I love that word. I'm going to use it.
It's
I'm
almost
taking
like
it, Gary.
it's almost like saying swell.
Swell.
Swell. It's just swell. I love it.
I love it.
It's like hipster talk. I like it.
I love it.
So you guys have also worked on another documentary with respects to Phil Schneider. Yes. That one.
It's not me.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, I'm just going to the stuff that Michelle sent me. UFOs, UFOs, government, underground systems, bases, whistleblowers.
My favorite.
This just seems to have everything.
My favorite.
Yeah.
Love them. Gotta love me some Snowden.
Who was, why don't we start off by saying who was Phil Schneider?
So Phil Schneider was a man that passed away in 1996. He went on lecture tour for a short amount of time to conferences that attract people that are interested in, everything from UFOs to Bigfoot. And he said, I worked on building underground bases for the American military industrial complex, one of which was at Dulce, New Mexico, under the Archuleta Mesa over there. And, there's parts of his story that are very sensational. I was on a show before this that I said, some of his stuff I don't believe is true. He said he got into like a firefight with aliens when they broke through this chamber, and it was an ancient, extraterrestrial race that was living there. I think he really spiced up the theme or the theory that there are underground bases that are credible, that are around the world, that have been built by many different intelligence agencies and military agencies. He brought the extraterrestrial issue up, government suppression, all that stuff. And it's important that he did that, but he did it in a very sort of Rambo 007, action star way. And that's why his story has been so prevalent, so popular today, because people like those types of stories. We can't get enough of the Avengers and superheroes and all that stuff, right?
But even the drama builds up and they just love it. They eat it up.
Yeah. And I think he did say some very true, incredible stuff about underground bases, and Richard Dolan and Richard Sauter in that documentary, and they both lend very credible history to UFO phenomenon and cover up suppression of this information, the art of suiciding people, killing them and making it look like a suicide. And
that's real.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, Frank Olson is a perfect example of that. If you want to watch a documentary series that's based on how Frank Olson died when he was basically working on biological warfare systems for the military, it's called Wormwood, the documentary series on
Okay.
Netflix.
Yeah.
And he worked for the CIA, and apparently they got him high on, basically LSD, and threw him out a apartment window, making it look like he had just offed himself.
Yeah.
But potentially they saw him as a information leak threat. And back in those days, even in the 90s, and maybe even closer to now, if you were considered a threat, people could be murdered for threat of destabilizing the geopolitical realm that we live in, destabilizing the economy. There's all kinds of things that are of national security interest by the military. And if you look up Executive Order 10501, which President Eisenhower actually signed into effect, and it was effective in 1953, that is basically an embargo. That is a law that says anything that could be put to academic or research agencies or government agencies, military agencies, FBI, CIA, NSA, all of these agencies can adopt this executive order and use it by law to suppress certain knowledge from hitting the public. And
wow. That's a lot of power.
yeah, and you can Google this executive order, and some people in this phenomenon researchers believe that this may be the groundwork for establishing a rule not to allow this stuff to be accepted in the public and be released to safeguard and protect politics, our capitalist economy, and so on and so forth. So this documentary touches on a bunch of that stuff, and Phil Schneider's story is very interesting, and the underground base and the suppression of this UFO phenomenon and possible interaction has been going on for a long time, since 1947 at least.
Yeah, where they make, a pact for technology versus, yeah, go ahead, you can abduct people, you can experiment on them, well, theory,
Yeah,
but
that's the working theory. But
yeah,
The underground bases just thrills me to pieces, because we all know Area 51 with its stories, and in Hollywood and how they emphasize on it, but also people who seek it out to see what's really there. When they get there, they realize that if they pass a perimeter of, I can't remember how many feet, you're shot and killed. It says we'll shoot to kill right there. I mean, why even take that risk? Have you uncovered other bases that are similar to that?
They have ground sensors all around that property.
Yeah.
And there's been people that have reported they've crossed a certain area that they haven't, been allowed to be in at night, and waited a little while, and then all of a sudden surrounding them are a bunch of soldiers, and they're like, what the heck? Like, we didn't see any lights, we didn't hear anything, they just appeared.
That's scary.
And
very
yeah,
stealth.
that's kind of where they're at in terms of the security of that base. But there's all kinds of alleged bases that may exist. The Dulce, New Mexico base that supposedly exists under the Archuleta Mesa there in the city of Dulce. And there's S4 that our friend Bob Lazar discussed flying to from Las Vegas, from a private airport in Las Vegas every day. That he was researching and trying to reverse engineer the propulsion system for an aircraft that the American government had captured or had in their inventory. That's out in Groom Lake, which is near Area 51. It's all in that desert area, and supposedly built into a mountain formation. The NORAD base, former NORAD headquarters, built into Chesapeake Mountain. There's all of these locations, strategic locations that people don't usually go to. You've got Mount Weather, which is where the FEMA headquarters is in West Virginia.
Yeah.
You've got Camp David, where that's built underground, and that's a retreat that many presidents have said they've been to.
Yes.
Under the NSA complex, that building, we see this modern glass structure, but supposedly under that building, there's anywhere between 20 to 25 floors built underground, housing massive server farms to monitor all kinds of communications that have to do with national security, threats.
Phenomenal.
So,
of course, one of the newest one being under the Colorado, or it's a Denver airport. And then
people discuss
DIA,
that too.
Yeah.
And then really
there's a lot of evidence and witnesses to that, though. DIA's got a lot. It's been in the news a lot lately for that, the last few years.
Yep. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think if you look at Richard Sauter's investigations into underground bases, he wrote 4 different books. He purports that there has been technology and plans, even by the British Navy, to build under the ocean bases since the 1960s. And he includes illustrations in Hidden in Plain Sight, one of his later books, that were commissioned by the British Navy by an artist to render for them, because they were planning to pitch this to their one of their agencies to possibly fund and build. So, it's very, if you think about what a underground base could be useful for, it's very simple. Keep things out of sight, out of sound. You can do research.
Off radar.
You can house exotic technologies and also just secure. You can hide things out and keep command and intelligence stations for your national defense in deep underground military bases very easily. You know that a rocket or a missile is not going to breach through the roof of your base if you're quite deep, and you have the type of technology to reinforce everything.
So what do you say to people who, let's say, such as Corey Goode, who makes a lot of claims about seeing a lot of extraterrestrials and other interdimensional beings in these bases working alongside, the military human beings? Do you give any merit to that?
I don't know Corey Goode, and I don't.
Me neither.
I've seen some of his testimony, but I think there was other people that came before him, like Paul Benowitz, who discussed the Dulce, New Mexico base and possible ET habitation. Even Bob Lazar said that there was discussion at S4 facility that, in the craft that he was looking at, the S4, the sports model, he called it, there was little seats, which other scientists that were part of the project nicknamed the seats for the kids, which would be a entity that's childlike in size, but much more advanced than us, that were apparently piloting this craft. And some people allege that there might have been some. He said he thought he had seen, when he was looking through a interview window of a room one time at this base, he saw something that looked like a short childlike being or something. He didn't know if it was a doll or an actual living thing. But you take these accounts and you can build up all this testimony that kind of compounds and say, maybe there is something going on here, where we have research going on into technologies that were just trying to figure it out. And we have a cooperation with certain extraterrestrial races that are allowed to come here, and we have a bit of a transfer program in terms of knowledge trade and training and such. I know that Gary McKinnon, who's interesting British individual who hacked into a Jet Propulsion Lab servers that NASA has. He reported when he was uncovering UFOs in proprietary photos that they had been beaming back to Earth from who knows what they were capturing those on in above Earth orbit. He said on the same servers he found a manifest list of missions that were being carried out above Earth orbit with flight crew that were of human and extraterrestrial cadets.
Really?
So who knows? Why would an agency, a research agency?
I'm gonna have nightmares. Sorry.
Well,
I talk to dead people, and I'm gonna have nightmares.
So that brings me to another question. And you get a lot of people who are experiencers, contactees, abductees. Do you think, that they're being, because some people do believe that government are the ones that are not always, ET does apparently take people, but some believe that so does government. Do you think that they're taking people, leading you to think you're on a ship, but maybe you're really just staying right here on Earth in one of these locations?
Yeah, there have been what have been described as MyLabs carried out, military abductions, so to speak. And the contactees that have reported this seem to think that they were an information fact-finding sort of experiment where they're trying to simulate the same circumstances that the contactees had when they were abducted by someone off-world. And the military is doing this because they want to create an environment that makes you think you're in the same place, but then you're debriefed and they ask you questions to understand what you went through so that they have more intel on the subject. That's the theory. I haven't really dived really deep into all of that. I've heard the reports, and there's some interesting individuals that have come forward over the years to describe these things happening to them. I don't rule it out. I mean,
you should speak to our producer, Joe Montaldo, because he owns ICAR, which is the largest abductee research center probably in the world. They probably have about 70,000 members, people who have been contacted and abducted. Many of them have been put under hypnosis. And if you're looking for further information, he's definitely the guy. He owns the station, so he could probably definitely give you, some further information on that. So,
well, thank you. And I mean, like I produced a documentary that came out in 2018 called Being Taken, and that documentary is literally a matter-of-fact explanation for the history of abductions that have happened. Some of the more high-profile cases, like Travis Walton, Betty and Barney Hill, and just going back right up until now, and then the skeptical side of things and the explanations for from the mainstream perspective how those aren't real. Some people say, oh, it's sleep paralysis, but what happened with Travis?
No.
Yeah, how is it possible it's
I did a
sleep
show
paralysis?
On that too. Well, because
or some people say it's a psychological incident, and it's like, nah. If you look at somebody like Travis Walton, both of those scenarios don't work out. 4 people were sitting in a car watching him be struck by a beam that emanated from this craft above him.
Mm-hmm.
And then they drove off thinking he was dead, and he reappeared a few days later, and recollected this whole abduction phenomenon with a clear state of mind. He didn't have to have hypnosis, so it wasn't a psychological event.
No.
There was corroborated
Oh, it was
evidence of
crazy.
They didn't
other,
loop him.
yeah.
Like they
So-
didn't seem to wipe him for some reason. Like he
Yeah.
came back with all of his faculties about the experience, which is that's really not often heard of.
See,
Yeah,
I believe the Hills account. Maybe it's because I had the opportunity to interview their niece years ago, but she still does see the circuit where she talks about their story and everything.
Yeah.
And
Kathleen Marden.
Yes, I was
She's
so
featured-
fascinated by her.
We featured her in the documentary as well.
Yeah.
So she gave us a bit of a history because she's a family member, and she grew up with them.
She grew up with the story. She has everything. She's amazing to talk to. So salt of the earth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Travis's story has always interested me the most because there were witnesses. Most people get taken, you're on that dark, lonely road like the Hills, or, they're sucking you out of your bed, or, I myself have had, I've woken up and seen a gray right in the house. Like I could have touched it. And I just remember looking at it going, nope, rolled over and back to bed. Not doing it. So I left it at that. But it's like an image that's just burned. I'm wide awake. It's just burned in my head. Like you just can't undo it once you've seen it. But
and many people have had those experiences. Yeah.
I'd be in a psych ward. I'm not gonna lie.
I remember having recollections now as a child, and it wakes up memories for sure. Sorry, Gary. I know you tried to speak too. Sorry.
We all did. I have 100 questions.
Travis is so credible. He was on Joe Rogan recently, and I've got a dear friend, Jennifer Stein. She owns Blue Wings Productions. She's a film producer in Pennsylvania. She made the documentary with Travis, on Travis a few years ago. I was watching. It always strikes me that when you talk to these people, or when you listen to them, and John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist, and Bassett mentioned last night that his book's just been released about him, and it's already become the bestseller because he's such a credible man to go and interview so many abductees and decide whether or not these people were either mentally ill or there was something. His conclusion, look, there's something to this.
It's important to have men like him out there and you out there because you're credible, both of you. It's very important. I'm going to ask you another crazy, silly question. Okay, Darcy? The Fourth Kind, the movie, fact or fiction? I ask everybody.
It messed her up so bad. I was just laughing.
It did.
Oh my God.
It did. No, seriously, I can sit through a horror film and my friends will take me to the theater just to hear me laugh because I laugh at the whole. They're like cringing and I'm laughing my head off. But The Fourth Kind?
She messaged me. She goes, "That is the most effed up thing I've ever seen."
Yeah, I loved Fourth Kind.
Yeah, it was good.
Gives me nightmares.
That's the whole story in Nome, Alaska, and it's not real. It's a portrayal of the abduction phenomenon.
Some truth to it, right?
There's truth to elements of it because the abduction phenomenon has people very helpless in many situations. They're frozen. They have no way of getting out of the situation that they're in. They're captives, so to speak, and they show that. But it's a horror movie, and the way that they build the movie and they open it up and they close it before the credits with the text and the information. They're very clever because they try to do it in that, the opening of Fargo, the Coen brothers film. They say,
I love that film.
This is, they say at the starting of the film in the text, the sort of prologue, they say, this is based on a true story. But if you watch the special features of that film, you find out that, they appeared on all of these, they were on PBS, like all these public radio access, and being interviewed across the country in the United States and probably the UK and stuff. And the interviewers like yourselves were like, so, first of all, tell us about the true story. Like, how did you come across this story, and where did it come from? And who are the people? And they always did this very amazing political circular action to get around the question
Wow.
and actually answer it, because it was a marketing technique. They just put "this is a true story" based on a true story at the starting of Fargo to
So Ben Affleck's
make
not
people.
in the CIA.
No, I don't think so. But in that film,
It was a great film, though.
Yeah. Fargo is William H. Macy, and I'm trying to a bunch of other great actors.
Ben Affleck plays the CIA agent that goes over. Yeah.
I don't know if Ben Affleck's
Oh
in it,
no,
actually.
I'm thinking of Argo. Sorry, not
Argo,
Fargo.
yeah,
Fargo
no,
was
no,
a phenomenal movie.
Yeah. That's a true story.
I
But
can see how Fargo people would think that is real.
yeah, but Fourth Kind, not a true story. They're just taking elements of the abduction experience and they're turning it into a more horrific experience. And the same thing happened with Fire in the Sky, for that matter. I mean, if you look at Travis Walton's real accounts, there was a mix of scary and benevolent in that experience. You know, he was treated well on the craft. You know, when he was frightened, they backed off, and then he had a bit of time to walk around himself and check things out. Then they kind of like appeared in apparently sexy human form and put him back to sleep and
dumped him off without his clothes. That's just great.
But in Fire in the Sky, the movie, it's all horrific. You know, they got things jamming in his eyes. His mouth is, you know, is kind of being almost raped. And so,
yeah, but there are reports
that's Hollywood
from abductees too, though.
So there's reports that their clothes are on backwards or inside out and wrong shoes or extra small clothing.
Yeah,
Betty and Barney Hill, you know, the incident seems somewhat horrific and somewhat benevolent. If you look at the strange case there, you know, Barney, when they first got out of the car to look at the object approaching them, Barney took out his binoculars and he focused his eyes on the craft, and he said he could see a being looking at him through the binoculars. And then he started experiencing mind speak, and he said it was communicating to him, and it said, "Stay right there. We're coming to you. Don't be afraid. Don't worry." And he said, like that, he couldn't move anymore. He was paralyzed. And he was, you know, if you listen to the hypnosis tapes, he was screaming in fear, and he was having a panic attack in that regression, crying and screaming and trying to get away, but he couldn't move. This was his thought process was panic attack and absolutely terrified, but he couldn't move his body, and eventually they were on this craft. But a sign of benevolence in that story, you know, Stanton Friedman we have in the documentary, and he says Betty was lying on a table and they were doing some kind of medical procedure and analysis of her body, and they sticked a large needle into her abdomen, and she screamed out in pain. And supposedly one of the leaders of this group waved its hand over her head, and immediately she felt no pain. So that's a sign that they care. They don't want to torture you. They just want to get the information they're trying to extract. And yeah.
I think the common factor in this is that why the hell did they get out of the car in the first place? I just don't think I'm fascinated with this
mesmerized
stuff, but enough to get out of the car,
mesmerized,
expose yourself. Here I am, you know, like
Well,
it's almost like, you know, and
yeah.
you're kind of like, hey, you know.
Well, look at
That's-
Travis. You know, he's a very humble man.
He
but,
is.
he started. He was a tree feller, you know, in a logging crew,
So what was he
and
thinking?
he was
I
thinking.
gotta get him on the show.
He was thinking exactly what you're thinking when you're a young man. You know,
Yeah. What?
when you're
Wow.
when you're a
Yeah.
young man, you're not thinking. You think you're invincible, and you're just curious.
You think this is groovy.
And for yeah.
Oh.
For Betty and Barney Hill,
Yeah.
their car was shut down.
Yeah,
So that was the preemptive act that made them go, "What the heck's going on?" So they get out of the car to try and take a look
Lure
at
them out.
why this thing was
completely
shut
dead.
down.
It went
And then
completely
they
dead. Yeah.
keep investigating, and that's where it all takes off from there.
Mhm.
Mhm.
In Gary's case, they would just be hovering over the field, and he'd be out there running around. Wait, I want to see this happen. There you go.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe these people are just meant to be taken. Maybe a version of the story is if Gary didn't get out of the car, maybe the car would have been stopped. Who knows?
Joe would
yeah.
tell you it's generational at times.
Some people
Yeah.
believe there's bloodlines.
I
Some
believe
people
it.
believe.
Yeah, I believe it.
Kathleen Marden, who's
Mm.
a family member of
Mhm.
the Betty and Barney Hill family, she claims she had abduction experiences herself. So
Mm. No, I believe that. You start talking to family members after, you start remembering things, and they'll be like, "Yeah, yes, I remember things like that." And and I've spoken to other, people whom I've known, and I mean, they've had experiences, where they wake up as they're being taken through a solid,
Ugh.
object like a wall or a roof.
and you wake
Oh,
up and you're kind of
God.
halfway through, and you're just like terrified, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, how do you function in society after that? Like, you just can't even. I wouldn't want to wake up.
Yeah.
It's just
How do you
that's
tell,
happening.
how do you tell anyone? Thank
Dr.
God
John-
for people like you.
Well, Dr. John Mack, yeah, he reported on many different abductees having that experience of being taken through an object,
Mhm.
breaking the laws of physics as we know it. So
Yeah, Gary, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I did a lecture a couple of years ago in Glastonbury, England, and I was asked to talk about UFOs, although I'm not a ufologist, but because I've been in the field, and I work with Jaime Maussan and so on, I get to hear stories, and I know people that one of the things that's interested me is I titled the lecture "Those Left Behind" because I wanted to talk about what happens to people when they try to report having had these experiences. And
Right.
I used the two cases of the children at Westall High School in 1966. 400 children and 3 teachers saw this UFO in the school playground.
Mhm.
In about 15 minutes, the men in black turned up and said there's no such thing as aliens. No one's allowed to talk about it. They sent all the newscasters away that had arrived, and it was all kind of tamped down.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
1994 in Zimbabwe, there was another the Ariel School mystery where John Mack actually went and interviewed the children who all saw a craft. They saw a being. One of them was telepathically communicated to about what we're doing to the environment. There's always this theme of we're destroying ourselves kind of thing that comes with these experiences. But what struck me was how these people are treated. There was a woman who's in her 50s, 60s now, who was at the Westall High School, who's psychologically damaged. She's had to have therapy, and everybody says, "Oh, what do you want?" And she was 12 years old. She was in a playground.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We're actually pretty mean to people who step forward. And we mentioned whistleblowers earlier, right?
Yes.
Well, I consider myself a whistleblower.
Yes.
Reality isn't like they tell you.
Right.
And what whistleblowers, right? You get attacked.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's not an easy thing to talk about. Sorry, go ahead. I can't hear you. There we go. Better. No, still can't.
can you hear me now?
Can't.
Yes.
I can't. I feel
Okay,
like
sorry.
we're in a Verizon commercial.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
can you hear me?
That's right.
So
You're welcome, Verizon.
our whole society is is a information filter. You know,
Mm-hmm.
our peer groups and our academic mainstream science and the media, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Fox News and CNN and all that stuff, is an information filter, and we often control each other,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just through suppression. You know, I've had many friends in my life that scoff at me and treat me like I'm an idiot for creating documentaries like I do. And most of them are not my friends anymore because their mind is, first of all, too closed to think like that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they don't really serve any purpose. They get in the way of um, other critical thinking that's important to me. And they are literally pushing me in a certain direction that they find comfortable. And that direction usually ends up being mainstream politics, sports, Hollywood celebrity, you know, all that type of stuff is what's more important today than the things on the fringe that we're talking about right now, which challenge our reality as we know it.
We're living
And
in a world right now that's challenging our reality, and the powers that be are leading us in a certain direction because it's exactly what you say, Darcy. Let the people be the ones to judge and condemn their peers or their family. Oh, you don't do this, you don't do that. This is the way it is. You're being silly. You're not taking this seriously. You know, and it's like the divide and conquer thing. It's just, you know, I think the world is living through just that. And that's just something, you know, that's in the forefront. Can you imagine something like all of what we're talking about tonight that's not really in the forefront? It's kind of on a back burner because people just can't get their head around that.
sure,
Do you think it's fear?
it's just what's comfortable to people. And I mean, it happens in mainstream science all the time. You've got Copernicus that came out in the early days of the Greek Empire and said,
Mm-hmm.
look, the Earth is the center of the universe and the sun revolves around the Earth, and so do all the other planetoids.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had Galileo come and challenge that theory, and the Catholic Church, you know, locked him away in prison and said, no, you're not allowed to rewrite history. And he said, well, look, I'm using my telescope and I am looking at this object and I am making observations that it is moving, and I have proof to it, and this is now mainstream. But you know, this was not the mainstream theory at the time. I'm hoping that some of the stuff we're talking about tonight becomes mainstream one day. And the reason why I make some of these documentaries is with the slight activist tone to it, to push to the public that there's something here that you should pay attention to, that's not ridiculous, and don't treat people like shit that believe in this stuff, because there's some truth to it. So and you know, with disclosure the way that it's going now, people are becoming somewhat vindicated in this research field to a degree that you know, certain things possibly are true, and maybe more and more things will become unveiled as the years go on, that there's certain truth to the elements, the many different layers. You know, we've talked about crop circles tonight, abductions, government secrecy, underground bases. Like, we might start to hear about some of these things, probably not the government suppression secrecy stuff as much, because that means you have to admit some guilt, but probably, you know, some information about who's visiting us and that we're not alone.
The military ties, unfortunately, brings up political ties, and then starts a whole other argument. I think that's what happens anyways in my case when having a discussion with someone, because then it goes directly to which government was in charge when, and forgetting that we know this for a fact, that the United States president is not given any information about UFOs or ETs, because he is considered a temporary position. And you can email Darcy for that. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You can send the emails my way. I'm used to
There's
getting
a question in the chat for you
Yes.
guys from CC if you want to put it through. Amelia.
Yep. CC Champagne, who is also an author, writes, if you're abducted with your cell phone GPS tracker on, would it show evidence tracking you?
It does for Joe. It's happened to a couple of
Does
different
it?
members.
I would
Yeah.
imagine that would get burnt right out. I don't know.
What do you guys
Darcy?
think?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I don't have enough data to basically answer that fully, but I will say that if we're dealing with a abduction that's not a my lab, I'm 100% sure that these beings are so far advanced to us that they can counteract probably a lot of our technology. And if you look at stories of Skinwalker Ranch, for example, and then the NIDS team that was researching this property for years, one of those members was part of the To the Stars Academy, John Mellon. And basically what they reported in their research from living on those grounds and setting up cameras to record everything on the property, 24/7 to capture all this anomalous UFO and sort of paranormal experiences that were being had there by their team and previous occupants before and after. They were being eluded in every step and turn that they made. You can watch Jeremy Corbell's documentary, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, I think it's called. And, they say that camera lines were being cut, and cattle were being stacked inside of these like containers somehow without any space in between them, and they don't even know how the cattle even got attracted to being in there, as if it was like some kind of Rubik's Cube puzzle, but with animals that was nefarious,
Bigelow was out there for what, like 20 years or something? And then when he sold the place, he just stopped talking about it.
Robert Bigelow, I don't think he was out there physically for a long time.
He owned it and all the research that he was funding.
He spent money on the NIDS team, and from what you hear through the grapevine is that he went to the ranch himself, had a horrific experience that possibly followed him off of the property. And he doesn't want anything to do with it now because of that.
Oh yeah, he went real quiet, sold it. But I'm glad to see like that the research is still going on. I mean, there's obviously something out there, But now with technology, I think you're just seeing there's just so much more. They're just coming out with so much more. I love it. I watch it. Some people didn't really dig the series when they came out with it, and I said, I don't know. They've got some pretty good stuff considering they've only had a few episodes,
I never saw it. I've heard of it. I really want to see it. Apparently, it's pretty interesting.
It was interesting. They got some really good stuff. It's just slow going at first, but when it starts going, you're like, geez, like it's all right there. It's not like, you're seeing a craft. They're filming it. It's coming like right over them. There's things happening like right there. They had a cow drop dead right there. Just like,
wow, really?
Yeah, it's worth a watch. I think it's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah,
that's a plug.
There's so much going on that ranch. It's hard to pinpoint anything.
Yeah, there's just
Is it ET? Is there a vortex? Is there a portal? It's just ridiculous.
They had the whole mess just light up.
Yep.
At night, they're just sitting there and they're videoing, and the whole thing just lights up and goes off and comes back, and their equipment's just going off the charts. It's just like, it's interesting. You got some pretty good names on there. I can't see why they would jeopardize their own careers just for fanfare. It's not worth it. So, okay, what's next? What's next for you guys? Let's start with Gary. What's next for you? Or are you gonna do it together? I like that.
Well, I'm settling down here in Mexico. I'm planning to be here for the next at least 4 or 5 years.
Oh, nice.
I'm working.
Mexico? Did you
I'm in
say
Mexico.
Mexico?
That's
Yeah.
what he said.
Oh, I'm so jealous. It's like my favorite country. Yeah.
I've been here 15 months now.
It's beautiful there.
I live in the woods at 9,000 feet above the city.
So may I ask why Mexico? Like, is it a hotbed? Is it a?
Well, I work for Jaime Maussan. He runs the TV show here in Mexico. I started working with him as a correspondent for the Crop Circles back in 2007.
Okay.
So I used to do reports and edit them, send them to him so that they could put them on the show. And then last year, my eldest son, who's 32 now, decided to leave home finally. So I thought, well, I've got the house on my own. I'm rattling around. Perhaps I should.
Yeah.
So I moved here, and I'm producing. I wrote a 16-episode show in Spanish for Gaia TV on Crop Circles.
Congratulations! Yes.
It's the most comprehensive TV show on Crop Circles. You know, that goes from the history and the man-made and the symbolism and so on and so on. So I'm hoping that that's in English as well.
Look forward to seeing it. Yeah.
History Channel have got a 2-hour special that's sort of condensed version of that I wrote for Gaia. Condensed it, changed it around and re-edited it for History Channel. That's coming out the next few weeks on History Channel.
Fantastic.
I produce content for the Sunday show. We have a 2-hour show here on Sundays. So when Crop Circles come up, or we're talking about history of certain things on Crop Circles, I produce and edit that together. I translate the show that Jaime produces into English, and then we've created a YouTube channel recently, Maussan TV English. I've got a Portuguese friend in Brazil who translates it into Portuguese. So we've got this wonderful AI app that creates voiceovers when you feed the script into it, and I re-put that in with the appropriate voices.
Nice.
Which I hope to finish. I wrote a book some years ago, but I was never happy with it. I'm rewriting it on the Crop Circles to sort of give a 25-year version of my take on it all. So yeah,
nice.
lots going.
Oh, we'll have to
Looking
do this
forward
again,
to
get that
it.
book out. Yeah, this is
Here
great.
I thought it was 4 a.m. for you. Meanwhile, you're about the same time as us.
So Darcy, how about you? What's next?
So I've been busy at work on another documentary, and I just currently finished it up. It'll be released probably in June of this year. And that is a secret space documentary. It's called Secret Space UFOs Part 1, and it's going to be a series. It's an hour and 24 minutes, and it's being released by Uncorked Entertainment, which is the company that took on the Crop Circle Realities documentary. And
fantastic documentary, Darcy. Fantastic.
Thank you. So I think this documentary is very interesting. It really covers a deep history of not only UFO events that have happened in NASA history, but also just the secrecy behind it and the effort to keep this from going to the public, and the different theories that have come about revolving around, have we been to the moon, have we not, it kind of a culmination of all that stuff. And we try to take a very centered and fact-based and logical approach to presenting that data. So yeah, I'm really proud of that. I'm really excited about that coming out. I don't think there's anything out there like it right now, and hasn't been before. And that's going to be number one. There's going to be part 2 at least, and maybe a part 3. So stay tuned.
Wow,
Very
lots of
good.
data.
If people want to check out other films I've made, we spoke about a few others on this show. They can go to my website, www.occultjourneys.com. And I have the trailers there, the film posters. If you click the film poster, it'll take you through to a streaming site that you can watch it on, and description of the films as you scroll through too. So yeah.
That's excellent. And how does anybody find you, Gary?
Well, I have a Facebook page called Against the Grain.
Ooh, I have to look for that. Against the Grain.
I regularly post stuff on that. I like photography, so for a number of years I used to fly in the helicopters and all the rest of it to take pictures, and then got a drone and started to take some sort of epic sunsets behind the crop circle.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Whatever I'm up to, if I'm doing radio and TV interviews like tonight, I post it on my page to let people know. And whatever I produce for TV, or any little things I do. If I've done some analysis of crop circles in geometry, I'll make an animation, I'll post it on there. That's keep the crop circle thing going. Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
fantastic.
and Gary's brought back groovy.
I brought back groovy. Yeah.
Yes,
Is
you
there a
did.
Spanish word for groovy? I want to know.
Yeah, El Groovy.
Oh, groovy.
El Groovy Dulce.
It's funny. My God. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It was a lot of fun. The time just flew by, and we'll have to do it again. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it'll be great. Well, I think you're coming back on actually in June for your Sasquatch and crypto stuff. I think that'll be a lot of fun too. But
Well, we might as well talk about Secret Space at the same time when I come on, because that's when the other film will come out. So
we could do
Oh,
that, and we could just book you again.
And you
Maybe,
can come back and talk
There
about
we go.
Sasquatch.
No,
That's how you know he's
absolutely.
Canadian. When you see you lead off with Sasquatch, you know he's Canadian.
Oh yeah, it's the Canadian animal.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Maybe we can incorporate Sasquatch into like ufology, because people think he's an alien and he uses portals to pop around and stuff. So
Some believe that. Watch my documentaries.
Oh, we will. We will. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We will do it again. It was informative. It was a lot of fun. And thank you. So now I better sign us off or I get fired. So
Thanks for having us. It's been great talking with you,
Thank
Amelia
you
and
so
Michelle.
much.
our pleasure.
Look
Thank
forward
you.
to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you. Well, we've come to another awesome segment of the Outer Realm, and wow, awesome and informative it was. Big thank you to everyone who tuned in, everyone who participated in the chat room. Thank you to our guests, Darcy Weir and Gary King, to our producer, Joe Montaldo. Please remember to stop by the United Public Radio and United Paranormal Radio on YouTube. Subscribe to both, and feel free to stop over to the Outer Realm on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and tomorrow night join us again, because we have Mr. Freddie Silva coming back on, and he's just a wealth of information. He's oh God, I love this man's
One heck of a soothing voice too.
that too.
Yeah.
Too. And we're going to be talking. I don't want to give it away, but yeah, I'm just going to leave it right there. We're going to be talking about the last art of resurrection. And yes, it sounds as funky as it is. It is wonderful, just well researched. I'm just delving into it, and I know we only have him for an hour, so make sure you are here and listen to what he's got to say, because it's always fantastic. So until then, y'all behave, and we'll see you tomorrow night. And good night.